It's finally time once again to jump into the escape from BackCells prison, but today we're doing things slightly differently. Instead of taking existing Backrooms entities and turning those into supervillains, I'm going to take subscriber original created Backrooms entities and turn those into supervillains to fit into the story today. And of course, I'm finally going to draw the main character of this series, Jake Tajan, aka The Kid. Plus, I'm going to show off the other stuff that was submitted for this redraw episode. I think this is going to be a good long chapter of BackCells, and I'm excited to share it with you all, so let's get into it, shall we? Let's go! Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show. Day 32, trapped in BackCells prison. I think, anyway. It's kinda hard to tell, the days have all blurred together since arriving on level 48. After barely escaping that brainwashed, lobotomized serial killer, Skinner, sent by that jerk gentleman Bestar to kill Anna and me, we arrived on a sandy beach that looked pretty nice, but still had the gross, musty smell of every other place I'd been in BackCells prison. I healed up our new, sort of, friend, Samantha, but it took a few hours of having my glowy green goop powers activated on her arm. Luckily, she said the green stuff soothed the pain instantly, even if it still took a while to heal it. Skinner had practically ripped all the skin off her forearms, and for the first hour of healing, I was just doing everything I could to not look at it. Anna and I tried to get Samantha to tell us what she meant earlier, when she grabbed Anna's arm, got this weird look on her face, and said that Anna and I were going to escape BackCells, but she didn't really have much new info for us. She said she could have visions about people's future by touching them, but they weren't always clear and could change based on what decisions someone was thinking of making. She said we were going to escape, but that something just as bad as getting stuck in BackCells was going to happen as soon as we did. I told her that was super vague and pretty useless, which I guess was kinda harsh, but then she scratched my arm with her freaky cat claws, so I don't really feel bad about it. Anyway, after Samantha was healed up, we started searching for who we'd come to this level to find. Some guy named Jerry. According to the message from our friend Kate, who was still stuck in Bestar's fighting arena on level 5 and had told us she wasn't gonna escape with us for some reason, Jerry could help us get to the level called Fight for Your Life, where we could find the key to get us out of this place. I think Anna was still kinda messed up over the fact that Kate wasn't escaping with us. I was hearing her mumbling to herself all the time, a lot, about going back to try and free Kate and all the infinite pros and cons Anna could come up with about it. Honestly, it made me kind of mad for the first few days I knew Anna. She mumbled a lot. Like, a lot. And first of all, I just wanted to get out of this place as fast as possible. This place sucks on a level of sucking that I didn't even know was possible. But on top of that, Kate had given us so much help to get out ourselves that going back would be like a slap in the face to her. And I may have made that point to Anna pretty loudly and not in a super friendly way a few days into searching around the palm tree forests of level 48. In fact, it's probably fair to say I kinda freaked out at her to stop muttering so much about Kate. She didn't really talk to me for the next couple days other than a few words here and there. I knew I was gonna have to apologize eventually, but I was putting it off, I don't know why. Before I got around to it though, I thought karma was catching up with me, cause my leg got snatched up from under me by a vine and I was whipped into the air. I thought it was some kinda trap or something someone had laid, but then this green-skinned woman with thick leaves covering her eyes walked out from behind a tree, and I saw that the vines were coming off of her arm. I tried to call out to Anna and Samantha, but one of the vines wrapped around my mouth. The green lady lowered me down till I was a foot in front of her face, and she said in an eerie, quiet voice, "Please tell me that you're here for a fight." Her head suddenly jolted to the side. I didn't know what she was reacting to, but she shot out her other arm, and vines unraveled from it and flew through the woods. Soon I could see Anna was approaching, with her breath held, leaping through the vines. The tendrils lashed at her, but they moved right through Anna's body thanks to her phasing powers. Anna got close, leapt at the green lady, took a deep breath to become tangible, and slammed her fist against the viney woman's face. She stumbled back and the vines loosened on me enough to fall to the ground and scramble back to my feet. I thanked Anna, but she kinda just silently nodded. We were both ready for a fight, but then Samantha walked onto the scene. "Sorry to disappoint you, Floracna, but we're not here for a fight." The green lady replied, "Samantha, Really? You think anyone here is gonna trust a lackey of Bestar? Samantha snarled and flared her claws. I'm nobody's lackey. I didn't even want to be here. I was just called in for a favor because apparently Jerry can help these little ankle biters here get to fight for your life. Floracna suddenly stood upright and had a huge grin spread across her face. Fight for your life? Well, why didn't you say so? About 20 minutes of walking later, we'd followed Floracna to this big base camp full of huts and a few dozen dancing, partying villains. Some seemed interested in us, but most didn't. Samantha did get a few dirty looks, though. The whole place kind of looked like a mash of ridiculous things put together. At one point, we even walked past this pit that was surrounded by cheering people, and inside I could have sworn were two cartoon characters in real life beating each other up. We were brought into this big main hut in the middle of everything, where there was a villain massaging the feet of this guy in a wooden throne. He was kind of human, but had blue feathers all over him, and a beak in place of his mouth and nose. And just like that, it turned out, we'd finally found Jerry. When Jerry saw us, he thanked his massager, waved them off, and stood up. Wow, look at what we have here. Some new friends come to join us. He looked over at Samantha. And some old friends. Samantha, is Bestar finally sending apology to old Jerry here? Samantha snapped again at being thought of as Bestar's lackey, but the conversation shifted quickly when Floracna mentioned why Anna and I were here. Oh, what fortuitous timing! Our last entrant hasn't even finished his run yet. We didn't know what that meant, but Jerry skipped out of the hut and led us to this massive set of what must have been like a couple hundred monitors, surrounded by a few cheering people. The screens showed a bunch of angles of this huge hallway with blaring red lights and swarms of villains beating the snot out of each other. Jerry asked if anyone had eyes on some guy named Gakwalid. A few people pointed us to a monitor on the lower left. This guy with a body that looked made out of red stone was fighting off what I thought was a guy who could clone himself, because there were like 4 of this speedy, yellow, glowy guy attacking him, but I later found out that wasn't the case. Anyway, the red dude was getting pummeled from every angle, but then he shifted his body from stone to red liquid, then into smoke, and he just kind of floated away from the guys attacking him. On his way out, he even thrust his smoky hand at one of them, and the mist went down into the glowy guy's throat, and he just passed out. The crowd went nuts and followed this floaty red guy through a bunch of monitors, until Gakwalid started approaching some lady with a cape, a bird skull for a head, and a mechanical set of arms and legs. Then, everyone just started booing. Some people even walked away. Hey, come on, maybe he'll get her. Have a little bit of oh, no, he's dead. I'd looked away for a second at the people leaving, and when I looked back, Gakwalid's body had shifted back into a sort of solid state, and he was just wobbling back and forth. The bird lady slowly marched towards him, but as she did, in his hazy state, he did manage to point at her, and then at his back. I looked around to see if anyone knew what he was doing, but they all just seemed bummed out. The bird lady got close, thrust her neck back, and pecked straight through Gakwalid's head. His body dropped to the ground, and the bird lady wandered off. Turned out, she'd taken out a lot of the people they'd sent in there. At first, I was kinda worried, not just about the fact that Anna and I were planning to go down into that insane place, but because I assumed Jerry and his people had forced those people to go down in there, kinda like Bestar in his fighting arena. Turned out that wasn't the case, though. Over the next afternoon, we realized that Jerry really was actually a pretty decent guy. Bestar had spread rumors to lots of people that anyone who finds Jerry gets hypnotized to become his mindless follower, but that wasn't actually true. Everyone who knew Jerry just really liked him because he was one of the few people who'd managed to make peaceful settlements in BackCells. The guy we'd just seen die and fight for your life had gone down on purpose to try and be one of the few people to get through it. Once every few months, apparently, someone will try it, but it was very rare for anyone to actually survive. Jerry soon explained to us why. Not only were there a bunch of real evil villains down there that stayed there just for the fun of spending their lives killing whoever entered and tried to get through, but also because as soon as someone does enter, they're cloned 10 times. But all of the copies are mindless killing machines that are specifically trying to hunt down the person they're cloned from. Then once they do, the copies just stay down there forever looking for more people to kill. But even on top of all that, making it that much harder for us, I assumed that most people going down there weren't trying to find some hidden key that Anna and I were after that could apparently get us out of BackCells. A key that we had no idea how we were gonna locate. Anna and I have started doing a lot of training now, separately at first because Anna was still kinda quiet around me after I snapped at her, but we're gonna need to work together eventually. Anna is trying to hold her breath longer so she can stay intangible more, and is trying to figure out if she can make me intangible too by touching me while holding her breath. We still have no idea if that could be possible for her. I'm mostly trying to improve my flying. If Anna can make us both intangible and I can fly good enough to carry her through quickly, we might have a chance. Might. To be honest, it's kinda tempting to just stay here. Jerry has really made the best of this place. They've got plenty of food and water because of their special elevator that literally can only go to fight for your life. They don't just use it to send people who want to go down there, but whenever they're running low on food or the weird bottles of almond water that they have, they stick a bunch of that in the elevator, send it down, bring it back up, and it's multiplied 10 times because of the cloning thing. But I don't know, I don't think I'd ever really be happy just staying here, even though I don't have much waiting for me back outside BackCells anyway. For the first few days at Jerry's base camp, Anna and I were still keeping quiet about the key that we were looking for. Even Samantha didn't know that we were after it, but eventually Jerry got curious. So, what do a couple of nice kids like you want to do and fight for your life anyway? Anna started answering at first, and of course that didn't really go well.
We just want to see if we can make it. We're gonna be looking for a friend of ours who.
Luckily, Jerry pretty quickly interrupted, saying, "Yeah, it wouldn't by chance be because you're looking for the key, would it?" I got kinda tense after he said that, even though at this point I trusted Jerry more than most people in here. So I said, "You know about the key?" "Of course I do. In fact, I was there when the warden, Dresden, first brought it into BackCells." The name Dresden quickly sparked a memory from my earlier days in BackCells. Bestar had cursed this guy, Dresden, when he talked about how someone gets trapped in BackCells prison by, as he said, infuriating the wrong overseer. Still didn't really know what that meant. We asked Jerry about it, and he said that he'd heard overseers were the people who watched over different dimensions, which I guess different dimensions are just a thing, and I've got to accept that. Still to know what I would have done to make the overseer of my dimension mad enough to send me in here, but best guess is it has something to do with the crystals that Anna and I had each found and gotten our powers from just before getting sent in here. Anyway, it turned out this Dresden guy was the one who ran this whole place, and is the only guy who can come and go as he pleases. Apparently, Jerry had sighted the guy a few times before, said he had a glowing forearm, but almost totally gray, sort of burnt-looking skin, and some pink veins running along the side of his head from his left eye. Jerry had never actually interacted with him until Jerry came to level 48 and was looking for a new place to start a base camp after being chased out of level 1 by some of Bestar's goons, who'd always been at odds with Jerry and his group. Jerry had started to settle here and build some huts and stuff when Dresden, out of nowhere, just walked right up to Jerry holding some glowy rock and said, "This key will lead anyone who finds it to the end. Allow them to escape my prison and go back to their dimension. Do with this information what you will." Dresden then snapped his fingers and a portal opened up and dropped all the monitors here, as well as the elevator to Fight for Your Life. Then Dresden snapped his fingers again and was gone, but showed up on one of the monitors in Fight for Your Life, and he just dropped the key there. Then all of the monitors went static for a few seconds, and when they came back on, Dresden was gone and the key was out of sight. Jerry still has no idea why Dresden told him that information, but also thinks that Dresden told Bestar as well, since goons of Bestar every now and then show up on the monitors running through Fight for Your Life looking for something. Before, of course, getting massacred. Could have just been that someone in Jerry's camp had been spreading the info, but Jerry's followers tended to be very loyal, and especially uninterested in saying anything to Bestar's people. Our next big stroke of luck actually came when Jerry said that he might have a way to find the key once we were in there. He guessed that given how glowy the thing was, and how powerful it must be to get someone out of this stupid prison, it must give off a lot of energy. So anytime someone was going down there, whether to look for the key or not, Jerry always got them to wear a pair of goggles that could see energy waves from an intense enough source. We asked if he had a pair that we could take, and he led us to this crate with tons of different pads and equipment. He gave us each a pair of green energy goggles and said that we could take whatever else we wanted from there as well. Not a lot of it fit us, but Anna and I each got some padding and stuff to help protect us, at least a little bit. We thanked Jerry and he wandered off towards the pit, where people were watching cartoon characters beat each other up. Turned out one of the people in Jerry's group was this sweaty guy with literally a camera for a face who could look into people's memories, see their favorite cartoons, then bring them to life to attack the person. But here in Jerry's camp, he'd turned it into a game where people would just pit their favorite cartoons against each other for sport. It seemed a little bit messed up at times, but I did sort of have fun on one of the days watching a My Little Pony beat up a Smurf. Anyway, Anna and I finally had a quiet moment together, so I figured it was as good a time as any to give an overdue apology. I told Anna I was sorry for snapping at her, that this place was bringing out the worst in me, and it had been hard to focus on trying to be nice when I was so focused on just trying to stay alive. I told her how I just felt so useless in this place. Pretty much the only reason I was still alive was because of her or Kate, and I was just getting pushed through life in here. And that wasn't actually that different from my life on the outside either. I realized she and I didn't really know that much about each other, so I told her about my parents and brother Mason and how they died, and since then I'd been jumped through 3 different foster homes. One had been shut down because the people running it had been selling, I don't know, they never actually told us, but I assumed it was drugs or something. Then the next one, the woman who ran it was this super easily spooked woman who was totally terrified of the dark, and one day she had a mental breakdown, saying some goopy shadow monster was haunting her in the night and coming to kill her. She got sent to a psych ward or something, and I went to another home where I'd only been for a few weeks before I found that crystal, had gotten my powers, and been thrown into BackCells for whatever reason. I just wanted some kind of control over anything in my life now, and knowing that I probably wouldn't even have that once I got out of here just made my mood that much worse. Overall, it probably wasn't that great of an apology to Anna, since, I was basically just making excuses the whole time, but she did seem to appreciate it, and got to tell me a bit about herself too. Her dad had died when she was young, and her mom had never seemed that interested in actually being a mom, so Anna had to do everything for herself. The only fun she ever really had was going to the lake in a forest near her home, where she got a chance to swim, which she loved doing, and that had been where she found the crystal that gave her powers, before, of course, getting sent in here. But she said in spite of everything, she was, in a crazy way, glad she'd gotten sent here. When Anna had gotten trapped in Bestar's fighting arena with unkillable Kate, she said that she finally met someone who gave her some hope that things could get better. Kate had a saying that seems crazy from a person who's spent half her life trying to survive in Bestar's fighting arena against her will. She says, "Everything that sucks is good for you." She says all the garbage in your life makes you tougher, so when more garbage is heaped on you later, you're better at handling it. Anna said she's tried to see things that way ever since meeting Kate. I honestly don't know if I can try and see things that way, but I guess Kate has been through a lot worse than me, so maybe if she can do it, I can too. It was really nice having a relaxed talk with Anna, but eventually we joined Samantha and Jerry and the others at the cartoon fighting pit before going to bed. It was nice to have some calm before getting back to training, too. Our plan currently is to train for another month before going down to fight for our lives, but realistically we may need even longer than that. One step at a time, I guess. Anyway, good night for now. Day 34. Sort of. Our plan to train for another month didn't really pan out, since just after writing that last entry, I got about 4 hours of sleep before screaming and alarms jolted me awake. I whipped on the pads and clothes I'd gotten from Jerry and ran outside to see just people running around everywhere, scattering, scrambling to grab weapons. Some of them were fleeing to the forest. I had no idea what was up until a horrible shriek came from across the camp. Some villain was lifted up into the air and literally ripped in half. Through a mist of blood, I saw someone I hoped I was never gonna see again. The towering, lobotomized serial killer, Skinner. He'd finally found us. His dead-eyed look found me and he started stomping right towards me. Some people attacked him, but he just totally ignored them. The cartoon guy suddenly summoned a bunch of cartoon characters to run at Skinner, and they all started attacking him, but it was just a brief distraction. I was gonna start running when Anna came up to me.
Jake, we have to get to the elevator, now.
It was weird hearing Anna be so decisive, but she always got that way when we were in a fight. I didn't think we were ready. I know for sure we weren't ready, but I didn't know what other choice we had. We both sprinted over towards the elevator, going past Jerry and Samantha. They both saw where we were headed. Samantha sort of snorted and said, "Good luck, kids. Hope I don't see you again." But, in a good way. Then Jerry said, Show us how it's done, kids. Get out of here and prove it's possible." We thanked them both for all their help, then ran right up to the elevator and pressed the button. It dinged and opened so slowly that it felt like an eternity was going by. I turned to see Skinner was batting away the last of the cartoons as he marched after us. We finally were able to get into the elevator and press the only button in there, and we waited. And waited and waited. The doors were moving so slowly that it seemed like they were never going to close. When they finally actually started to move, Skinner seemed to notice, and he booked it straight towards us. He tackled through Samantha and Jerry, stomped up to us, and dove into the elevator. And the doors closed behind him on all of us. We were dead. I was completely convinced that he was just going to shred us to pieces. We had nowhere to go. That is, until Anna grabbed my shoulder and held her breath. Anna had still never phased someone else successfully, but all I could do in that moment was hope. Skinner raised his massive palm, still dripping with some villain's blood, and swung it right at me. But his hand went through us. It had actually worked. Anna had phased us both. I kinda wanted to cheer, but I knew we were far from out of trouble. Anna and I stood pressed up against the wall, staring horrified up at the freak as he waved his massive arms through our bodies, trying to grab us. I was panting like crazy, but Anna kept her breath held. The second she took a breath, we'd become tangible again, and Skinner could tear us to pieces. And problem was, we had no idea how long this elevator ride was. Could Anna even make it? Every second felt like an hour, so I had no idea how long we were in there. But eventually Anna's face started to go pale. Her eyes started to flutter shut. She was gonna hold her breath until she passed out. She'd be dead for sure if she got knocked out, because either Skinner would kill her in here, or our murderer clones would get her out there. I didn't give myself a second to think. I ripped my arm free from her and ducked under Skinner's legs, and leapt up onto his back, yelling at Anna to breathe. I wrapped my hands around Skinner's head and activated my powers, not even fully sure what I wanted to accomplish, just knowing I needed to keep him away from Anna. He whipped his flesh-shredding hands towards me, but then slowed to a stop before grabbing me. I was still ready for an attack, but it didn't come. He was just kind of frozen, and Anna panted in breaths of air while I just stayed on Skinner, confused but not wanting to do anything different. Anna came up with an idea of what was going on before I could.
Skinner was lobotomized before getting sent into BackCells and then brainwashed by Bestar to do his bidding. What if your powers are healing his brain?
It made sense, but even that wasn't necessarily a good thing. He'd gotten lobotomized because he was a crazy serial killer in the first place. Still, keeping him from attacking us was for sure a good thing. Well, it lasted. After another minute, the elevator stopped, and all of us suddenly hovered up off the ground. My stomach shook and my throat knotted. My vision went insane for a sec, like I could see from a whole bunch of different sets of eyes. Then, the door dinged open, and we were all flung out into the flashing red hallway. I'd fallen off Skinner and leapt up to see where he and Anna were. I looked back towards the elevator, and as Jerry had said, I saw a whole bunch of other me's getting up, along with clones of Anna, and worse still, a bunch of clones of Skinner. The energy goggles were surprisingly letting me see which ones were the originals of each of us, because all the clones were giving off a slightly different sort of energy. I spotted Anna quick and called her over. She jumped up and ran towards me with her breath held. Some of the other hers and me's flailed their limbs at her as she ran, but she just went right through. She got to me and took some deep breaths.
Okay, Jake, let's hope that your training paid off. Look out!
She grabbed me and suddenly a glowy yellow figure leapt right through us both. He rolled into some of the other me's, spun in a circle and kicked 3 of them away before looking back at us. I turned so Anna could leap onto my back and activated my powers, hovering us up into the air, but then a voice called from behind me.
Wait, Jake, don't go!
Had I been tricked into holding an Anna clone? I whipped around just as the yellow guy leapt at us again and flew through us once more. He skidded to a stop in front of us, then said, in Anna's voice,
Don't you want to stay and play, Jake?
From my back, Anna yelled,
Go, go, go! I'll phase you when we need it!
I fired forward, we shot through the yellow guy again, and soared down the halls, with a ton of us and Skinners just chasing on after. The fight for our lives was on. The other Annas were falling behind, but a bunch of Skinners were keeping up behind us, and some of the other me's had figured out their flying pretty quick, and were trying to tackle us out of the air. Anna kept phasing us so they'd fly through, but there were so many of them that she was barely getting chances to breathe. I tried to thrust out my arm to punch one of them that was coming in for an attack, but that almost made me fall out of the air. I really needed to focus on flying. Suddenly, my leg was grabbed from behind and yanked. I yelled out, but Anna quickly phased us again, and the hand slipped through. I glanced back to see that it was the yellow guy, keeping up with us, running super fast, and now he was just waving his hand through our bodies so we couldn't phase back. He grinned and once more spoke in Anna's voice.
Phasing, huh? That's a pretty neat trick, Jake. You two are fun.
I tried swerving aside, but he followed us, his hand still in us. I crept trying to shake him, and I knew Anna needed to breathe. So finally, I glanced up and realized that the ceiling was just high enough to get out of his reach. I flew up and had Anna practically scraping the ceiling, but she finally got a chance to breathe. Unfortunately, one of the me's took that chance. He tackled right into us and grabbed Anna off me. The weight change threw me off balance, and I spun through the air and crashed to the ground. I leapt up pretty quick, and just got a glimpse of Anna phasing away from one of the clones of me before the yellow guy came in and tackled me to the ground. He raised a fist to punch me, and I thought about hitting back, but then noticed that he had a deep cut running down his arm. Instead of attacking, I instinctively grabbed that and activated my healing. It stopped his swing, and in what I guess was his own actual voice, he said, "What in the... That feels good. What are you trying to do to me, Kit?" He was suddenly ripped off of me by a Skinner clone. I looked away and heard the yellow guy's horrible shriek, but really didn't want to watch another Skinner killing. I ran back towards Anna, who was moving through 2 of the me's. She got through them, but another was flying down right behind her, and I didn't think she'd noticed. I was about to call out when the original Skinner suddenly snatched my clone out of the air and tried to force the clone's hand onto his head. The clone just punched and thrashed, and Skinner then just slammed it into the ground before reaching for another one of me. Anna got to me and grabbed my arm to phase us, but instead of flying off, I pointed her at what Skinner was doing. I asked her, "Do you think you can phase 3 people at once?" Once again, I appreciated how decisive Anna was when we were in a fight. She ran with me over to Skinner, who was hammering his fist against one of his own clones, and we both jumped up onto his back. I grabbed his head and started healing again. Anna phased us so a bunch of attacks that were incoming could go through us. Skinner let out a surprisingly peaceful sigh as I tried to heal him. I then spoke into his ear. "I don't know if you can understand me, but if you can get us through here, I'll keep healing you." He groaned, but then turned and continued sprinting full tilt down the hall, going even faster than we'd been flying. Some of the other hymns were still on our tail, but any time they swung at us, Anna would phase us all. Skinner swung back, and Anna tried to make sure he was tangible when he did so his hits would land. That went on for at least 2 hours. I had no idea how long Skinner could go for, but he didn't even seem to be getting tired as we shot through the blaring red halls, eventually lost the other hymns, and fired past any other villains in this place. We were like a trio perfectly built to get through this place, and we were actually getting through. After a few hours, I started to see something bright in the distance. It was like a glowing yellow beacon. I thought it might be an exit, but then I realized it wasn't a light that was actually illuminating anything. I took my goggles off for a second, and it vanished. I realized that what I was seeing wasn't a light source, it was an energy source. Anna saw it too. It actually could be the key. I could barely believe it. Skinner kept running and we got closer and closer until we were close enough to see that the energy was coming from a figure. As we approached and finally saw the silhouette of the person, I suddenly felt really faint. I thought it was just from overusing my powers at first, but soon my body completely failed me. At the exact same time, Anna and I flopped off Skinner's back to the ground. Right after that, Skinner stopped too, and seemed to be in a trance. We were all just stuck in this hazy state. All our bodies were just swaying, and I felt like I needed to spew. The figure walked closer, and I quickly realized that it was the bird-skulled lady who had killed Gakwalid. My vision was fading. Just looking at this freak seemed to be making us sick, but I couldn't look away either. She slowly walked towards us, and I knew what was coming. A beak right through all of our skulls. But then I realized something. The energy wasn't coming off of her. It was coming off of her back. Like how Gakwalid had gestured to his own back before he'd been killed. Under her cape was some kind of big cluster of fur that looked like it could have hid something inside it, almost like a backpack. That was where the energy was coming from. She walked up to Skinner, then hovered up off the ground to be eye level to the giant.
"You got pretty far, but the warden says only those who are worthy may escape. Are you worthy?"
She raised her neck slowly backwards. I didn't know if her beak could break through his hard head, but I didn't want to find out. I realized Skinner had only stopped after I'd fallen off, so maybe my healing had been keeping him safe from her... whatever her power is that's making us sick. I swung my shoulders as best I could and managed to flop my body to the ground and thrust my arm out. My fingers just barely reached Skinner's heel, and I activated my powers as best I could. I used every inch of my energy to try and get my green goop to creep up towards his head. It seemed like I was too late. She thrust her beak forward, but within an inch of her face, Skinner thrust his arm up and caught her. He swung out his other arm to grab her leg, then lifted her into the air, and I closed my eyes as he tore her in half. The haziness and sickness in my body instantly went away. I got back up onto Skinner and started healing him again to make sure he stayed friendly, and Anna ran over to where Skinner had tossed the lady's torso. Anna whipped the cape and fur out of the way and grabbed the energy-spewing object. It didn't look like a key, to be honest, but we both knew right there that this weirdly carved, I guess shard of a golden orb was our ticket out of BackCells. We spent another hour or so running through the level on Skinner's back, phasing through enemies until we finally got to the door at the end of the level. We literally tackled through it, but the pieces of the door just instantly reforged behind us as we did. We burst through into a blank white room, and we'd gotten out. Pretty quickly, the golden orb shard lit up and a spiral staircase suddenly opened into the floor, going down and down below us. We gestured for Skinner to go in, and he did. We walked down for about 5 minutes through darkness until we were submerged into what looked like an empty library. Or almost empty anyway. There were a bunch of skeletons and some decaying bodies. On the ceiling above, there were intricately painted letters spelling out "The End," followed by a question mark. At first, I was terrified that maybe this wasn't the end, but after a moment of looking around, we found some writing painted on the wall that said, "Need the key. Fight for your life." Luckily, we'd been there and done that. Our best guess was that some people had come here without having gotten the key and had just been trapped here and starved or something. Anna and I were both exhausted, and I had no idea how much longer I could keep healing Skinner before I just passed out, but we had to keep looking. Even if, as Samantha had warned us, something just as bad was waiting for us when we got out of BackCells. After half an hour of looking around, we found a weirdly dark wall that had a circular indent in it. It kinda looked like the golden rock we'd found could fit right in, so we gave it a shot. Anna leapt off Skinner, stepped forward, and placed the rock into the hole. It lit up the entire wall, then a beam shot at Anna's chest. It seemed like it was scanning her. Then the wall around the orb flashed through a whole bunch of different locations until it stopped on a lake surrounded by trees. Anna was frozen for a second, then turned around with tears in her eyes.
Oh, we did it.
It clicked in a second later that this was the lake she swam in back home. She leapt back onto Skinner, but her happiness had already slipped a bit. I guessed she was thinking about Kate, so I put a hand on her shoulder and said, "Kate would be proud of you. She wanted you to get out." Anna smiled a sad smile and nodded as we gestured Skinner forward. He walked through the opening, and for the first time in weeks, I took in a deep, beautiful inhale of fresh air. We'd escaped from BackCells prison. But our problems were far from over. When we turned around, the library and the key were just gone. I thought about jumping off Skinner, but didn't know what he'd do if I stopped healing him. Was he still going to be a threat to us? After a second, though, the sort of solution unfortunately found us. A black puddle opened up beneath us, and two octopus tentacles shot out, grabbed Anna and I off Skinner, and slammed us to the ground. The puddle then shifted into what looked like a demonic shark head and snapped right around him and pulled him into the ground, and then just vanished. I was horrified that it was some villain of BackCells, but the smell of the air was too pure here. It didn't have the awful musk of that place. We were out. Anna and I ran over to each other, and she grabbed me to phase us from whatever was here. Soon, a puff of black smoke appeared from nowhere before us. It swirled through the air and shifted and solidified into a figure, sitting cross-legged, hovering in the air before us. It was a girl, not much older than us, but with pitch black, flaking skin, yellow eyes, and glowing symbols spinning around on her forearm. She looked at us both, seeming tired and angry and confused all at once. "You two actually escaped from BackCells prison. That's impressive." I was exhausted and freaked out, but still managed to say, Who are you, and what did you just do to Skinner?" She looked at me. "I don't really have a name anymore. Nowadays, people just tend to refer to me as Fear herself, but call me what you will. As for your friend, I sent him back. This world was not his home anyhow." Did she mean she'd sent him back to BackCells? I then asked, Are you the one who sent us there in the first place?" I stammered, failing completely to sound intimidating at all. "Yes, I'm the overseer of our world, and you violated the rules of our world, even if you didn't know you were doing so." She hovered towards me and reached her hand towards me. Then the green gem in my hand suddenly made my arm thrust away from her against my will. "Yes, you unfortunately found something that I've long wished to banish from our world. I can't touch or affect those gems myself, but I can banish their users to my beloved's prison. Multiple times, if I must." Before I could think of more to ask, she twirled some of the symbols on her forearm, and the black puddle opened up beneath us again. Samantha's warnings suddenly made sense. What was something just as bad as getting sent to BackCells prison? Getting sent there again. Anna and I both yelled at her to stop, and she raised a hand to quiet us. "I will make you both a deal. I'm impressed that you managed to escape. You have earned
freedom. But nobody in our world is permitted to have abilities like the ones you gain from those crystals without my permission. Remove the crystals, allow them to find new hosts, and you are free to go back to your lives as normal.
My horror at being sent back was just kinda overtaking my decision making, and I pretty instantly grabbed at the gem and tried to pull it out. Fear saw that and said,
Tap 3 times and say, Gem of the Angelic, I relinquish your might.
I tapped it 3 times, started to speak, before noticing the mumbling coming from next to me. I stopped and looked at Anna, who was shaking and stammering to herself.
If we lose our powers, we can never even think about going back to get Kate, but she also wanted us to be free, and we are free now, but if we give up the gems and other people get them, then those people are going to be sent to BackCells, and I have no idea what...
Fear hovered up to Anna with her head tilted and said,
This should be an easy choice, and as such, I'm giving you 5 seconds to decide.
Anna just started stammering more and more, going through more pros and cons of the scenario. Fear started counting down.
5.
Anna wasn't going to decide in time.
4.
I didn't know if I could live with the idea either that someone else might get sent into BackCells if they got this gem next.
3.
Maybe the gems would just come back to us anyway.
2.
Anna was in tears and looking over at me as she kept on stammering.
1.
My decision was made. I kept my gem in and swung my fist as hard as I could at Fear's face. I think I hit pretty hard, but who knows how much pain she can take. I grabbed Anna and tried to run with her. I felt Anna phase both of our bodies, but it didn't really help. The black jaw lunged up from beneath us and clamped around us. For a moment, there was nothing. Then we dropped through a ceiling and fell onto a damp carpet in a musty yellow room. We were back at the start of BackCells prison. Skinner was surprisingly sat up against a wall nearby with his head in his hands. Anna was bawling now.
Jake, I'm sorry, I couldn't decide, I couldn't you...
I grabbed her and gave her a hug, still terrified myself, but trying not to show it.
It's okay, Anna. I chose for us. It was about time I made a real decision here anyway, right?
I was surprised how calm I was managing to keep myself, because I definitely wasn't feeling calm. I leaned back from her and wiped a tear off her cheek.
It does suck that we're back, but, you know, as Kate said, maybe everything that sucks is good for you. We'll figure out how to get out again, and this time we're not going without Kate. Anna did her best to smile, or I think if she was trying to smile, it really wasn't working well. She nodded, still shaking, or I don't know, maybe I was shaking. I didn't know if we really could do this again, if we'd made the right choice, but at least this time we would end up having a little bit more help. We found a safe-ish place to hide and finally got some sleep. I have no idea how long we were out for, but it felt like a fairly long time, though eventually we were woken up by what sounded like some kind of laser getting fired. Anna and I both heard it and leapt up, rested enough to fight, when around the corner came running I'm not even kidding, a gopher in a ripped tuxedo holding a gun. It just kinda looked at us, and us back at it. Was this thing some kind of super villain? Had someone really sent a gopher in here? And then another figure came running around the corner. He had a blue padded outfit, one of his arms was metal and the other one was on fire. He said, "Hey Gooby, wait up little buddy, how are you so fast? You're just a little..." The flamey armed guy stopped when he saw us. He looked up at Skinner, then down at Anna and me, and he gave us a surprisingly warm, if a bit confused, smile, and said, "Hi there, kids, and, giant blood-covered man. Long shot here, but any chance one of you knows where we can find a guy named Dresden?"
And that concludes Chapter 4 of The Escape from BackCells Prison. I don't actually know for sure how I'm going to do the next chapter, because I also have to explain how Sterling got himself trapped in BackCells, so I may make it like a Multiverse Tales kind of story with two... I'll figure it out, but it's gonna be a fun one. And probably the last chapter, unless I split it into two. But ignoring that for a moment, I want to say thank you so much to everyone that submitted for this redraw. It was a really fun one, I really enjoyed this, and specific thank you to the people who were selected. Xylan Tunes, Olivia Nealer, Crafty Cat, Ark in a Pamphlet, and Daniel Tang. That was a great redraw, but we're gonna roll right into the prompt for this next month. I want all of you out there to submit your own original Pokemon, or Fakeamon, however you want to call, your own original created Pokemon. And I'm most likely going to take them and turn them into SCPs, which was something someone recently suggested in the comments, but I went back and tried to find that comment and I couldn't find it anywhere, even by searching specific things. So sorry to that person, or multiple people if multiple people have suggested that. But yeah, Pokemon as SCPs is most likely what I'm doing this month. Maybe I'll turn the Pokemon into a bunch of different things, like a variety episode. We'll see. It's probably Fakeamon as SCPs. Instructions on screen, all that kind of stuff, deadlines, whatever, blah blah blah. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is a nice simple quote. Forgive yourself for not doing better when you didn't know better. You can't change the way you acted in the past, but what you can do is make sure you are acting as your best self now and in the future. I hope that's inspiring to someone out there. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.